Okay, hello everyone. Next session is going to be a bit of a deep dive on KCS, 50 minutes, a bit of a longer session on KCS. So we have John Custy, who's a service management authority. He's going to go with over 30 years of experience in the service management space across many industries with many different organizations. He's going to talk about KCS. So please join me in welcoming John.
Thank you, Christophe. Good afternoon. Everybody awake? Lunch didn't put you to sleep? You know, the horrible thing about being after lunch is they always serve just like lots of carbs and things that like you just move around enough, but then when you get in here and you sit down for a minute or two, then I got to figure out how to wake you guys up. So hopefully I'll keep you awake as we go through today. A couple of questions before we start, and I'm going to have some other questions in the slide, but how many of you are trying to do knowledge management? Okay, lots of you. How many of you are doing it well? All right. One. Okay. How many of you are struggling because it's the same thing? You're trying, but it just doesn't seem to work? Or I can't get people to contribute articles? Or maybe even some of you are, I got it working for a couple of months, and then it seemed to stop working for what was there. So we're going to talk about a couple of things. I'm going to talk about knowledge-centered support. And the challenge around knowledge, excuse me, isn't about technology. The challenge for most of you around knowledge is about having a process that's going to work for you. And that process has to be about how we're going to structure the information in such a way that we can search for it and we can find it. All right, that's still the easy part. Because the real challenge is who owns the knowledge in everybody's head? Who owns the knowledge in your head? Anybody? You do? The company does, or you do? You do. But didn't you sign like some kind of an agreement? If I go check that employee agreement, who will it say really owns that knowledge? Yeah, you know all the hours you work late and all the time you put in? Yeah. So the problem is the business somehow thinks they own it. So we're going to talk about a set of practices that's going to help you understand how to get there and put something in place that's going to really help you better set in place the opportunity for people to share. So we are going to talk about the KCS knowledge-centered support practices. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we call a demand curve to understand what that means for any initiative that you put in place. We'll talk about some benefits. We'll talk about a problem-solving model. So a lot of things that we're going to go in there. All right. For those of you that don't know me, I do a lot of work in the service management space. ITIL, ISO 20000, I go in and do assessments of IT organizations from how well they deliver services to your customers and work to how to help improve the services that are there for you. So I want to start with this whole concept of IT support. And I also want to clarify, I'll use IT as an example because that's kind of the scope of what most of you are in. But this methodology we're going to talk about, you'll see very quickly, if it's an HR group, HR can use this, finance can use it, facilities can use it, just about any one of your business units can use it. I'll just use the IT examples because hopefully that'll be easier for you. But do you actually know how much IT resources spent doing support? Not just the service desk, but let's take all of those developers, all those administrators, every time they get interrupted. Oh, when they get interrupted, how long does it take for them to get back to whatever they was working on? How much lost productivity is there? How often has somebody solved the issue and then somebody else is solving the same issue? And then when they move to another role and somebody else comes in, they go and resolve that same issue over again and over again. All right? How many of you actually know what the failure rate is for the services you offer your customers? Because your customers just really want it to work, right? They just want it to work. But do you actually know how many times it fails? Do you actually do any reporting to say, this is not only how many times it's failed, but this is what it cost us, IT. How about what it cost your customers? How about what it cost the business? Right? And if I really knew what it cost, would I then have the data to go justify making some of those changes to fix those recurring issues? Because you all have a lot of reoccurring issues that are in place. Now, we tend to focus on this reoccurring issue, which, by the way, is an issue when something doesn't work. But if you really look at the workload that comes into your service desk, for most of you, 80 or 85% of it isn't something that's failed. It's requests, isn't it? How-to questions. It's guidance. It's password resets. It's how do I get this? How do I get my new presentation mouse? How do I get my laptop? How do I get this? Or we just talked about from Puppet Labs, their growth. How much work do you think they spend adding new employees? Right? How many tasks go with every time you have to add somebody new? All of the access requests, the phone, the laptop, the VPN, they'll go through and through and through. And some of you have 35, 40, 50 different tasks just to onboard somebody. Right? Are those all really automated? And then when you actually search, how often do you really find an answer? You've already answered the question, but how often have you really find the answer? And do you really know who actually creates knowledge within your organization? Do you reward them? Think about rewards and recognition. Who do you reward? The heroes, right? The firefighters. Wait a minute. Are some of those firefighters arsonists? How about the team that did all the right things, didn't have a crisis? Do you recognize them? Do you reward that behavior? Or do you reward the behavior of the ones that don't share the knowledge, so I'm the only one that's got it, so I'm the only one that can fix it, but then I get recognized because I'm the only one that knows it, but I can't get anything done because everybody's in a line outside my door. All right? So are we really thinking about what's there? For most of you, typical enterprise type organization, you can save minimum 60% productivity gain by just basically putting basic knowledge. And think, how many times are you recreating the same solution over and over again? By the way, we hadn't even got to self-service. The fact that a lot of these requests are, again, highly repetitive, so somebody could find the answer, right? If we could put some of those robots in place to do the things instead of doing it all manually, how much more time could you save? And save so that we could what? Do things of higher value to your customers. All right? Does anybody have a knowledge team? You know, those one or two people that are supposed to look at knowledge or create the knowledge. A few of you do. You know, the ones we hide behind the wall so nobody can talk to them. But then nobody else is responsible. So anything that's wrong, you throw it over the wall, and 3 or 4 months later it shows up. But nobody really uses it because we already figured out the answers. All right? Or how about we create knowledge whether we need it or not? You know, everybody has to create 3 articles a week. And then we just end up with lots of crappy articles that nobody uses, but then this crappy articles, when I go search, I find lots of stuff, but then I don't use it. All right, so I think we've sort of been there. Or do knowledge in your spare time when you're not busy. Does anybody have not busy time? I just want to check, because I love it when I hear that. Well, when they're not busy. Yeah. You already gave them 10 other things to do when they're not busy, so no one's going to create it. Is it somebody else's responsibility? So I want to talk about some changes you need to think about. And one of the challenges is we talk about information workers. I want to talk about how to move to knowledge workers. I want to talk about what are the things you need to put in place so we have knowledge workers. And knowledge workers are valuable. Knowledge workers are valuable. All right? So why do we need to do this? We've already talked. You need to respond to issues quicker. And by the way, when you do self-service, you know what happens to the work that comes into your area? It just gets more complex. Because what are you going to automate? Simple, repetitive tasks. All right? You know what we just did to your talk time? It went up at least 50% to 100%. Because we got rid of all the stuff that took 2 minutes, took 3 minutes. We took all the easy stuff away. So things are going to become more complex. And if you think of all the things you're doing, you're integrating more things, which means it's going to be more complex. I need smarter people. I'd like to provide consistent answers. Like, I'd like to ask 3 people a question and get 1 answer, not get 4 answers, 5 answers, 6 answers, depending on the day that I asked it. All right? I'd like to reduce some of the stress. I'd like to do better learning. And if I change this, if I knew I could find an answer, I would totally change how I train people. But probably most importantly, I'd like to improve the customer experience. And I don't care if that's internal customers, it's external customers. How about if we provided them the right experience, right? As we heard this morning, how about that consumer level, that consumer grade experience, where we made them feel important, like we really cared about them, right? What if we did it, made sure we really cared about them? And what if we really had self-service that worked? Right? I'd like to have you viewed as a strategic asset of the organization, not a black hole, not a necessary evil, but a strategic asset. Because if we think about the service desk specifically, you're the one group that talks to everybody in the company, from the new hire the first day to the president's office. You're talking to all the people, right? You know what works, what doesn't work, what they like, what they don't like. What are you doing with all of that information? How are you helping to improve things? I got a demand curve up here, and this demand curve shows how we use knowledge. And that demand curve is just trying to show that over time what happens. Everybody gets a call, which means it's over time I get a question. If I don't know the answer, I figure it out. And therefore, I stop searching for knowledge at some point because I figured it out. I know what the answer is. So now let's go to a typical knowledge engineering approach. And how's that going to work? Well, I get an incident, and what do? I send that to the knowledge queue if I don't have an answer. And then the second time I send it to a queue, and the third time I send it to a queue. But oh, by the way, I got to give my customer an answer. So everybody's going to figure out a workaround or a solution, and we're going to work on it, and eventually at some point, we'll publish the knowledge. But it's on the far side of the demand curve. So what does that really mean? Well, it means by the time I publish it, everybody already has figured it out. No one's going to go back and use it. I spent a whole lot of time for something that has no return. No return to the organization. There's a cost, but not much return. So what if, when I first got the incident, however I solved it, whatever the workaround was available the second time the incident occurred? Let's go back. So what if we've got something that works, and we'll let this all build out. But the second time the incident occurs, I can find whatever the person did the first time. It's available immediately to be used. All right. Oops. Let's go back here. All right. And the second time, it's going to feed in, and it's going to work. All right. If it doesn't work this time, we'll keep going. And the second time, I can find how they fix it the first time. And the third time, I can find it. But what if the second time, someone said, yes, it's good, or I could enhance that. I can make it a little bit better. And the third time, somebody said, yes, that's good. You know what happens if 3 people used it? Sounds like it's a good solution, doesn't it? And I can then share it on that side of the demand curve, which means everybody else that gets the question can then reuse it. I want to move trusted knowledge to the point where people can use it. Not everybody's already created their own solution. I want to reduce the amount of redundancy. I want to reduce the amount of rework that goes on. And I'd like to give a consistent answer. Because what happens every time a sysadmin decides they're going to create their own solution? What did that just do to the stability of your environment? What did that just do to testing? Right? We continue to make it more and more complex. I'd like the one way we want to do it, I'd like to have everybody doing that. I want to validate whatever we used was correct, or if it wasn't, fix it. Then only one person ever gets to see something that wasn't correct. But in most cases, I'm going to add to it and add to it. It'll become more trusted. And if it becomes more trusted, then more people can use it. I want a better return on your investment, because I think you're all in business. Even if you're a nonprofit, you're still in a business. You have a finite amount of resource. I'd like to get a better return on that resource that we're using there. So how do I get knowledge out there? How do I get it? It's trusted. No one's going to get knowledge when it's extra. And no one gets very good knowledge by telling people they have to create solutions. So what I want to do, I want knowledge to be a byproduct of doing your job, not something extra. We don't have time to do extra things. I'd like to know that when I solved the issue, when I documented what we did, I want to be able to extract that and create the article right from that. I want to evolve the content. So here's the challenge. When you create articles and you publish them, the most work and resource goes into what? Publishing. But nobody uses it. For those of you that have knowledge bases, 80% of what's out there probably is never used. But you took a very finite resource and what? You're putting it on things that has no reuse. Not a very good return on your investment. What if instead we had a very simple article that wasn't ready to be published, and only after we used it a few times might we put all that resource into publishing? Right? What if we created a very simple solution, right, that worked for that instance? Because you know what happens when I go to a knowledge engineer? They create the perfect article. All of the things that might ever happen, including, well, we had 3 supermoons this year, so we've got to make sure it doesn't happen on a supermoon. Better make sure it doesn't happen in a blue moon. We create all the possible things that might ever happen. How much time does that take? And what's the value of that return? Because the probability of it happening is so low. So maybe we need to move to the concept of good enough. We don't need to be perfect, most of us, right? Unless you happen to be really working in an area that's life and death, then I'm going to move the bar up some. But for most of you, you're not in that area. So what if we evolved it? And the more we used it, the more a resource we'll put into it, because the more we'll reuse it, the more people might use it. But if only one person ever used it, and they can use it, why do I have to make it any better? They got it. They understand it. What if I made that solution the collective experience of the team? Not one person's experience, the collective experience of the team. And if I want people to get it, and here's one key thing about knowledge that a lot of people don't get. You can tell people to write articles. You can tell them contribute knowledge. Will they? No. The only way knowledge management works is when it's voluntary. You've got to create the environment that people are motivated to share it. All right? I got to have all the things I'll talk about to be in place so they can. But telling people to share it, you all know, doesn't work. All right? Because they'll do exactly what you said, to the letter, and you won't get what it is that you really need to have. So it really is about how do I engage them. So I'm going to come back to, do I reward people for collaborating? Do I reward people for sharing? Or do I reward them for being heroes? Well, sometimes I might need them, but an IT organization full of heroes is going to fail. I'd like to have the organization that doesn't require heroes because we did the right things at the right time. So let's put some of those in place. So what's knowledge-centered support? It's a methodology. It's 8 practices that focus on knowledge as the key asset of the organization. I don't want call takers. I don't want IT people. I want knowledge workers. That's going to have value because that's going to be an asset for the organization to be able to do other kinds of things. Next key change. KCS isn't something we do in addition. KCS is the way we're going to resolve the issue. It's integrated. It's part of the workflow. And when it's done the way it should be done, it actually means you'll get higher quality tickets, you'll resolve issues faster. All right? And your team will be more motivated because it's going to be more fun. They'll be more engaged. Now, I'm not going to tell you it's easy to get there because if it was, everybody'd be there because it's different. Right? And let's see, change is good, right? Because you guys all love change. IT people love change, right? Excuse me. I've been doing this for 20 years, right? You want to tell me how to do it? Or one of my favorites, we've been doing this a long time. How many managers have told us to do it differently? And who's still here? Yeah. We're on like the 3rd manager, and we're still here. Yeah. So change is difficult, but we really are talking about changing how people do their jobs because we're talking about sharing information. We're talking about collaborating, right? We've heard a lot of talk over the last 2 days about collaboration tools. We've got great technology to help us collaborate. But the only reason people are going to collaborate is they have to see how it helps them, right? So there's a big people piece, a leadership piece around how to help create the environment that makes it easy for people to collaborate, for them to want to collaborate. So what's KCS? Capture, structure, and reuse. The KCS methodology has been around almost 25 years. All right? Started as proprietary A lot of high-tech companies were using it in the 90s. Why? Because they realized they couldn't afford to just keep hiring people. They needed a better way to answer questions. All right. So let's talk a little bit about our practices. KCS is what we call a dual loop process. For those that know what it means, for those that don't worry about it. I'll explain it to you in a second. But we have two loops, a solve loop and an evolve loop. And the key things about it are this. Capture. Capture it in the workflow. I only ever want to capture the information once. Yeah, and you know what that means for some people? Those pads they write things on need to go away. You know, because when they write things on a pad and then they put it in the ticket afterwards, how much actually ends up in the ticket? Very little, right? Very little. So I want to capture it once. When I'm capturing it, I'm going to structure it. I'm going to structure it so I can reuse it, and when I reuse it, I'll improve it. It's going to be part of the workflow of how people work. I don't care if it's a service desk, I don't care if it's an HR rep, I don't care if it's somebody in finance. They should be tracking what questions people are asking. They should be recording it. I just want them to capture it in a particular way that's going to give me better quality data. Now, in order for people to do that, what has to really be in place? Well, I need to have some things like leadership, set a vision, communicate. Why are we doing this? Get people engaged, get them motivated. Performance assessment. You know, you give people a goal, they'll figure out how to get to the goal. Not necessarily the way you wanted them to get there, but they'll figure out how to get there. Do you have the right goals, the right outcomes? And if we talk about knowledge workers versus call takers or code writers, they're different goals. So I need to make sure I've got the right goals in the organization. I need to have integrated process. It has to be easy to record, to search my knowledge, to collaborate. Oh, I've got something that looks pretty close. Boy, if I could just ask a question of, can I easily just get that question asked? Can I get somebody to answer that question who might be able to just help me with one little thing I didn't know? I can get this issue resolved, or I can collect the right information before I escalate that ticket. So I need to have processes and technology integrated. If we're going to talk about knowledge management, I've got to have a few things like a style guide. What does it look like? Right? For knowledge to work well, I shouldn't be able to tell who wrote the answer. All right? And for people to use it, it has to have a consistent look and feel. All right? So I need some kind of a style guide. I probably need some states. You know, what's a work in progress? What's a draft? What's visibility? Who can see this? Who can see this? Because I don't want everybody to see everything, by the way. Right? Maybe I need a knowledge base just for my level 2, my sysadmins, my network admins. Boy, talk about security. Security people, yeah, they're going to put it in the knowledge base if anybody else can see it? No way. But if they had one, they could use it better. So I need different states. I need to know what level of trust I have in that article. Is it highly trusted? It's only ever been used once, and I'm not quite certain. You know, it was written by somebody that was here on the 3rd day, or it's written by somebody who's considered to be an expert. Again, what's the level of trust? I'm going to get to visibility and trust, how I'm going to use that. So all of those are going to come into play, and I'll talk about those a little bit in a second. But the key thing to remember as I go through all of this is I need a balance. And I need to balance 3 things. I need to balance the needs of the organization, the needs of the customer, and the needs of the analyst, the person doing the work. And all 3 of those need to be in balance if I'm going to have knowledge work. All 3 have to win. It's not 2 win and 1 loses, but all 3 have to win for this to be there. So I've got to take the experience of the analyst, the experience of the customer, and the experience of the organization. And we're not going to talk about directly in here today, but one of the sources for knowledge should also be your customers, because they're the ones that use the tools that you're providing all the time. And they use it day in and day out. Right? So who's capturing the experience of your customers and making that available to other customers, to other users? This is how the people that work on it all day actually do it, how they actually use it. So I've got these 3 stakeholders I want to put in there. What happens if I do it well? Well, my customers are going to have more confidence, better response time. My analysts are going to be empowered. They're going to be recognized. Their job is going to be more interesting. They're going to have and be able to answer a greater breadth of issues. Where today, most times, what do you got? It's how much I can remember. That's the breadth of my knowledge. What if I had a high probability that I could answer a question? How about all those people on call? Anybody here ever take the on-call? Ben Roll used to take them. Isn't it great how you always get calls for your area of expertise when you're on call? No? Those calls only come in when you're not on call? Yeah. So you're the one that has to wake somebody up at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, I'm really sorry, but I don't know the answer, but this is really important, right? Yeah, because it really isn't that important. If you knew what you were talking about, you'd realize you didn't have to wake me up until like 8 o'clock in the morning, right? So, well, what if there was like an 80% probability you could find the answer? Because, oh, by the way, those issues, they're repeat ones, aren't they? They're the same, and sometimes they even tell you who was calling, because they know it, yeah. But why don't we record that so that you could find it, and it's understandable to the person that's reading it, and you could give the answer. Or no, this isn't very important and it can wait till 8 o'clock in the morning, whatever the right answer is, right? Then we'd be more confident of what's there. We could be more efficient. So I want to make sure we're using resources correctly, right? I want to continue to broaden the resource and the breadth of what's there. Now, what am I going to get by doing some of this? Well, solve cases faster. For organizations that go to KCS, what happens to their performance? Typically, 50 to 60% improvement in time to resolution. A 30 to 50% increase in first contact resolution. 70% time to improve proficiency. Somebody new comes in, how long does it take them to be proficient? Whether it's 6 weeks or 6 months. How about if we drop that down? Because, oh, by the way, during that whole time frame, you're paying them. And the rest of your team is still carrying the workload because you're fully staffed, but somebody's not able to carry the work yet. We're going to cut that time by 70%. Another interesting thing happened. Employee retention went up. The job was more interesting. People stayed longer. Your employee satisfaction increased, which is what? Why retention went up. How about now self-service? Everybody wants to talk about, we want to be able to do self-service. By the way, help me, does any of your customers really want self-service? Show of hands, any customers like beating down the door, we want self-service? Okay. Well, I think self-service is important, but we want them to have self-service. Why? So they can do it themselves. Just like when I go home and my phone isn't working and I have to call Verizon and work through that tree to figure out how to get an answer. Yeah, really looking forward to that. Nobody really wants self-service. Yeah, there's a few people that do, but seriously, nobody really wants self-service. Now, it may be the best thing to do for the organization. It may be the best way to provide the most cost-effective way to provide a service. I'm not going to disagree with that, but nobody's running in saying, I want self-service. However, when it's done well, it can work, right? There are places where we go and use self-service. Right? Wow, everybody uses Amazon. Right? Well, we don't seem to mind at all about using it. And then when they offer us suggestions of other things we could buy, right? Somebody else that bought this book bought this one. Somebody else that bought this pots and pans bought this. Somebody else bought, and here's a cookbook to go with it. We're thrilled. We're thrilled with that experience. Why don't we think about offering that same experience to our customers? We know what experiences they like. Why don't we duplicate that experience rather than duplicating the experiences that they don't care for? Right? So we can do it by what? Making it easy to give them answers they can understand. All right? And then ultimately, what if we could start to figure out how to reduce the reason for some of those issues coming in? Because nobody really wants to call you. Right? Yeah, if I'm a developer, I may want to check and make sure this is the right thing. But a lot of the things we're talking about are repetitious things that, by the way, they're blockers. I know you may not think it's a blocker. Matter of fact, I had a discussion out here at lunch, and somebody was talking about, yeah, well, they put a blocker in because they lost their charger. Then what do? Well, we change it because it really isn't a blocker. You know what? If you're sitting at the airport and you can't get to your email, you can't check the order, and your phone's dead, that is a blocker. Oh, it's the last day of the month, and I need to book those orders. That really is a blocker for me. All right? So what if we could better understand what people were doing and really better understand the impact of what was going on? So what are we going to get with KCS? It's going to complement. I think this is a challenge here. One of the things about knowledge management is everybody thinks, let's do knowledge, especially CIOs. I want knowledge management, because you know what that means. We can put all untrained people at the desk. We're paying way too much for these help desk people. Let's get lower skilled people. Let's put knowledge in lower skilled people. Never happens. If you put a good knowledge system in that really works, if you put self-service in that really works, what's going to happen at your service desk? The level and skills of the people required are going to increase, because all you're doing is moving easy stuff away, and then what you're going to end up with is more complex issues, more difficult issues, which are going to require higher skilled people. Right? So we're not going to replace the people with it. What we're going to do is move it to more valuable work to have with your customers. Now, what kind of things are going to really happen here? So for those of you, curiosity, how many of your organizations are using ITIL or ISO 20000? Some of you? All right. So some of you may know some of these terms, but incident management, request fulfillment, problem management, change management, release management. Knowledge works with all of these, right? Wouldn't it be nice if when somebody asked the same question in a change meeting, which happens all the time, we had an answer that they could have looked up. They could have even answered it themselves before that, right? So it needs to complement all of those. Now, there's one other thing we know when we talk about whatever the first level of support is. And again, I don't care if it's finance, if it's IT, if it's HR, and that is nobody seems to have much respect for the first level, right? Because we don't know what they're doing. Because whatever we get isn't always well documented, or they should know the answer, right? They should know the answer. So how are we going to help solve this? Well, what if we did a better job with what we call capture? Capture in the workflow, right? Capture it in the customer's context. Not filter it, not translate it. What if we had relevant content? Right? What if we structured it when we captured it so that we could search it? And that structuring would make it more readable, promote consistency. It would be simple. All right? And what KCS advocates is we use the concept of what's called environment and issue, right? Which then makes the search much, much easier. All right? So we're going to structure it so we can find things. We're going to reuse. And I want to know how many times we reused an article. All right? And I want to link that knowledge to that particular issue, to that service. I want to know how many network failures were related to email, to ERP, to inventory, to whatever service you're running, all right? I want to know how many times we found it. I want to know where those linkages are. Most of you can already tell me where they are because you're experienced, you're there, you know what it is, but you can't quantify it. But if we could quantify it and put it in a report, then somebody might actually pay more attention to it. So what if we were able to do that? And then if we improve the articles we used, not improve all of them, just improve the ones we used, which would then make them more findable, which would then make them more usable, which then means people would actually like using self-service because we'll go to something that works. So I want it to work for you, right? And we'll keep migrating it. What if articles that were used a lot at level 2 got moved to level 1? Used at level 1 got moved to level 0, out to self-service? What if we keep moving articles, not just keep moving them so we can put more out there, but based on demand, we'll keep shifting them. Based on the different kinds of work we get, we'll keep shifting it all the way through. In order to do all of this, that right side, that's the people that are taking the calls. What are they going to do? They're going to capture it, they're going to structure it, they're going to reuse it, they're going to improve it. In order for them to be able to do that, what do you need to have in place? An article structure, a life cycle, a visibility, and probably most important, quality management, monitoring. Somebody needs to look at the articles and make sure they're at the right quality. Right? Score them. This is the minimum level of quality that we'll have in the organization, and that's how it's going to work. We're going to have some process, right? And one of the first things around process is what we call structured problem solving. So let's talk about that a second. Structured problem solving. Seek to understand before you seek to solve. How often we get, error code 423, somebody's off and running. It's nothing to do with whatever the issue is, but we want to chase some issue. can you really tell me what the person was trying to do? Can you tell me what results they got? Can you tell me what results they expected? Can you tell me what else might be working you don't expect to work? How about things that aren't working? Can anybody else do it? And then, of course, my favorite, when's the last time it worked, if ever? Now, if you can't answer those questions, should you be really looking for a solution? And boy, you certainly shouldn't have escalated unless you got the answers to those questions. Right? And if we answered those questions, what's the probability you would find the answer because somebody else has already asked the question? Right? If you only put structured problem solving in your organization today, just think how much better the customer experience would be, and just think of how many more things you'd resolve quicker just by doing that. Because how many of you hear that complaint? I don't know what those people do. Right? I looked at the ticket when I talked to the customer. It had nothing to do with what was there. So we have a lot of credibility issues. We have a lot of confidence issues. I don't want being reworked, because what happens every time you escalate a ticket to level 2? Do they pick up where level 1's left off? And no, they go back and start. And then I get called away for something else and I hand it to a peer. What do? Pick up where I left off? No, they go back to the beginning. And then I escalate it to level 3. What do? Oh no, they're all the way back to the, right? So think of, again, how much rework goes on because what? We aren't doing a good job doing the basics that should be done, just put in place there. Performance assessment. I think you all know that you've got to have the right goals. Goals need to be based on outcomes. What are the results that we want to get? And we talk in KCS about a concept of leading indicators and lagging indicators. Leading indicators are activities. IT people love to report on how busy they are, right? What does the business care about? Results. Does anybody really care how many sales calls a salesperson makes? How many hours they worked? How many sales proposals they put out? All we care is they sold enough to keep our bonus coming, keep us paid, keep everything funded. So how about the same thing for IT? How about if we just met the objectives we were trying to get out? So do we have the right goals in place? All right. Does anybody really care how quickly somebody answers the phone? How quickly an email gets responded to? I mean, within reason. You know, do I care if it's 10 seconds or 30 seconds? I care how long I was unable to do something. I care how long it took to get me an answer that removed whatever issue was preventing me from getting done what I wanted to get done. That's what I care about. Not how long it took for somebody to respond on a chat that said, yes, I'm here, and then went multitasking. I only saw them like 10 seconds every minute. So I was frustrated for the other 50 seconds because they weren't answering. I care how long it took. All right. Do I have the right things? Knowledge has to be collaborative. It's got to be based on the experience of the team. Do I have the right things in the environment? Do I have team-based measures? Do I have value-based measures? Which means, no, I don't want to start creating goals for, everybody gets to close 20 tickets a week, declare success. Yep, we got to do 5 of these and 6 of this. Because the other thing that happens with the team is everybody isn't the same, are they? There are some people that are better at particular tasks. I want the right group of people that all together creates the right outcomes for the group. Right? So I need team metrics, individual metrics. They need to be based on value. Right? And one way to ultimately get there is what we would call a balanced scorecard. Leadership. I've got to have this for any project, any initiative. Right? Why are we here? How does what this group is doing contributing to the success of the organization? Right? And if I talk about knowledge, I said it's got to be voluntary, and to be voluntary, it means it's intrinsic. People have to be engaged. They have to want to participate. Now, there's lots of ways to help you get there, all right? And yes, we can use rewards and we can use recognition. And this isn't about money, but it's about some of those intrinsic motivators. It's about the little things that are important to get people engaged. It is about communication, ongoing communication. Why is this important? How does this help us succeed? How what you did helped the organization get there? And certainly for those of you that are managers and supervisors, what are you doing to help people get the job done? What are you doing to help people be engaged and to be successful? So we've got our 8 practices: capture, structure, reuse, improve on our solve loop, the day-to-day, minute-to-minute activities that are occurring every time somebody sends a note, an issue, an email, a phone call. And then in order for people to be able to do that, what does the organization have to have? Leadership, communication, the right goals, measuring people, doing the right things around rewards and recognition and engagement, having the right tools, having them integrated. And the great thing with the tool set you guys is that basically you've got all those tools there. They are all integrated, all right? But you need to have a content health which is appropriate to your organization, not to somebody else's, but what works for you, what's going to work for your customers. I talked a little bit about structured problem solving. Again, literal, diagnostic, and research, but listening skills. Am I really listening to the customer? Did I really hear not only what they said, but how they are saying it? Right. Can I then take what they said, document it correctly, and search? Right. 85 to 90% of the time, you should find an answer, because that's the degree of reoccurrence you have with all the highly repetitive things that come in. When's the last time somebody got a brand new, never asked before question? Not just you never heard it before, but nobody's ever asked this in the organization before. Happens once an hour, once a day, once a week, no hands up yet. It's pretty infrequent, isn't it? What has to usually happen to get one of those brand new questions? Change. Who makes changes? You guys. I get a little bleep, little blip. I'll go right back to the same where I was. So, if we did a better job with it, we'd understand what's going on. If we understand what's going on, we could even go fix some of them. Right? We call problem management. Let's go find out why they're calling. Right? Maybe if we go fix the user interface, if we fix the training, improve the training. What if people actually went to training? You know? What's the difference between the region where people go to training, what's the rate of calls there, and then the region people don't go to training? Again, you've got the data. What are you doing with it? All right? So structured problem solving. Now, the challenge with any change is whenever I introduce change, people have to learn to do something different. So we have what we call the J curve. Right? And the J curve is, I'm performing and I'm going to introduce a change. What happens? Performance will drop while people are learning how to do it differently. And then it'll start to climb back up, the point where you were, and then hopefully it will continue to climb up and you will perform at a higher level. Well, this is important in any change that you're making because there always will be that dip. Now, there are ways to deal with that, right? You can do it all at once, the Big Bang approach, in which case you'll see a bigger dip. Or we can do what we call the wave approach, or also calls the phased approach, right? Let's not do everybody at once. Let's do a small number and a small number and a small number and a small number. And if I really looked, I'd see what? Little tiny dips that would sort of move and move and move and move. That's the wave approach. So that's where that comes from. But it's important to understand that because if you're going to do knowledge, it is going to be disruptive. To move from wherever you are to knowledge workers is transformational if you want to be successful. All right, and it's transformational because we're going to change goals. And by the way, not just your goals, we're going to change management goals. Well, you think changing goals for you is traumatic? Try changing middle management goals. They really are resistant to change. And their job will change because what? We're going to measure them differently. But it's about what's the value we're going to provide to the organization. So as I said, KCS is transformational. This isn't, yep, change to process, yep, let's just put new technology in. All right, it's much bigger than technology because we're changing strategy. Strategy, our plan to achieve our goals. I'm not changing the goals, but I will change the strategy, the plan of how I'm going to get there. So what do I need to have to be successful? I need to have a vision. Where do we want to get to? How is this going to help us succeed for whatever your business goals are? I need strategic objectives. I need key stakeholders who have bought into whatever this is. I need to invest in people. I need to design how this is going to work. I need to have coaches. I need to do monitoring, all right? Lots of roles. All we're saying is what? We need to invest in making sure people understand what those roles are. I need to invest in some process. Incident, problem, change, release, request, all right? And again, I'm not going to do them all at once. I'm going to take them one at a time. Right? The great thing is, with Jira, you've got the technology. Most times when I'm talking to groups, they're struggling with, how do I get technology? How do I get this? Oh, you've got the robots. You've got all the pieces that can work. You've just got to take a little bit of time to, again, start to put them in place. How are they going to help you deliver better services to your customers? All right? How are we going to get there? You've got reporting. You've got from what I can see and what I've heard from you guys is you've got a good self-service portal, right? You've got a lot of the key things everybody wants to say blocks you. You've got to be thinking of, how do I get to that next step? All right? So what are the real critical success factors of your succeeding? Executive commitment. We're going to change. This is a change of how we do things in IT, how we do things in HR, but it's a change, all right? Because we're talking about knowledge workers. We're talking about not having the knowledge exist in one or two people's heads, and they're valuable because we fear when they're out. What happens if a question comes in when they're not here? One of the key things to transformation is coaches. And coaches are there to help people through the transformation. Very, very important. All right? And corporate America is now getting the concept of coaches. Where 10 years ago, and by the way, for the people who don't know, most executives have coaches. Right? You may not know, but the board hires coaches. Why? Because it keeps them performing at high levels. All right? And when you look at the return on investment, it's pretty good. So what are organizations doing today? They're moving coaches down to managers, to middle managers, even in some cases to individual contributors. Why? There's a great return on the investment. Performance will increase. People are more engaged. All right? So we need to have some coaching. Probably more important, or as important, you've got to measure the right things. We're going to change how people do their jobs, which means we have to change the measures. And one of the reasons changes typically fail is we change a process and we keep the same metrics in place. And we expect people to work this way even though they're measured on this. People are going to work based on what they're measured on. So I have to change those measures. This isn't about putting a new technology in. This is about changing how we work, which means I got to have the right players. I've got to start by showing it's successful. I've got to start by creating enthusiasm around it. All right? This is a mindset change. And I've heard a lot in the last 2 days and seen a lot of great things about all of the collaborative tools. That enables us to get there. Where's the management mindset? Where are we talking and having people see how this experience of collaborating helps each other? And people are only going to do things when they see how it helps them. It's human nature, right? We've got the tools. How do we set ourselves up for success? What if we move to a just-in-time mindset instead of a just-in-case? Then I'm going to put my resources where we need it when something's happening, not, oh, in case this happens, in case this happens. I want collective wisdom of the team, that collaboration. I want the experiences of multiple people, not just the experiences of one person. Because you all know that one expert. There's only one way to do it, their way, right? We all know there's multiple ways to do it. I want a collaborative experience to get a better outcome for the organization. And knowledge isn't linear, all right? It's going to be networked. It's collaborative, all right? Which means we want to talk about the knowledge-centered approach versus the traditional knowledge engineering approach. And many of you have been dealing with the traditional knowledge engineering approach for 10 or 15 or 20 years, unfortunately unsuccessfully. It's not that knowledge engineering approach is wrong. It's wrong for the situation that you're in. It's good for particular environments. But the kind of environment we're talking about with the rate of change that we have, it's not the best solution, right? And it typically fails. So we've got to move to something that works. That's why we've got knowledge-centered support, right? It works. It's been working for 20 to 25 years. I can show you companies, tell you about companies who have literally been using it. Large companies, small companies, all right? And it works. Knowledge has to be managed at the point of creation, in demand. The person who solved it is the person who who's going to be responsible for documenting it. And if I go 2 or 3 levels away, if I do it tomorrow, I'm not going to remember it. Right? It's got to be at that point. I've got to make it easy to put it at that point, to create it then in the demand. Now, I've got some resources here for you, if you want, from the Consortium for Service Innovation, who owns the intellectual property. I've got the link up there. There's a practices guide. There's case studies. There's a verified program that you can take a look at. From an HDI perspective, I've got a white paper out there, especially for anybody that's looking at doing idle. There's a white paper from Axelos that we co-authored, which is about idle and KCS to show you the synergies between them. There are some classes, there's a coaching workshop, and then as a benefit for you, Christoph, I'll pass to you.
Thanks, John. So I basically liaise with HDI, and we got some special codes for you if you're interested to do some knowledge management trainings. So you can see here we organized 2. So there's a KCS Principles and a KCS Foundation. So if you use the promotional code on the screen, you're basically going to get a discount if you're interested to do the trainings with the HDI. So I've done a few trainings with them. They're really good trainings too. So yeah, we thought a little added value for you coming to Summit. Thanks, John.
Some good negotiating there, Christoph. I don't usually see them give away discounts like that, so bravo to you. All right, so that's there for you. That'll be posted. And so, again, I want to thank you, but again, one thought I want to leave you with is that knowledge, just like any of the other things we talked about, isn't being done for the sake of it. We're not doing knowledge to have good knowledge, or we're not doing change to have a great change process. We're doing these things so that we can provide more value to our customers. We're doing these things so that the services we provide better enable the organization to meet its goals. All right, thank you. So a couple of quick questions. How do you curate knowledge to clean up stale content? You don't. Nobody has time to do it. It never works. So it's real simple. If you keep track of what you use, then you use the algorithms and technology so things you use move up to the top. At some point, if you don't use it, archive it, right? If you didn't use it, why do you have somebody look at it? If you haven't used it, if it hasn't shown up in a search in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 18 months, archive it. Why would I ever spend somebody's time looking at it? If it didn't show up, it isn't worthwhile. So, and by the way, you all do it and put dates on it. Nobody ever does anything with it. You set yourself up for failure. Stop doing that. Use the tool. Only see things that are being used. And it works. It works. See if there's any others. No others? Okay, I think we're out of time.
Yeah.
So
Thanks, John.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone.